Hello everyone, thank you for coming to another of our Thursday night webinars. This evening we're going to be giving you a brief overview of the green card updates we've made, as well as some health and safety aspects and some safeguarding. Just before we start, just a little bit of housekeeping. If you would like to ask a question, as we have got quite a lot to go through this evening, please use the Q&A function. If we have got time at the end, Marisa and I will go through the questions. If we don't, or alternatively, please feel free to drop us an email. Our email addresses will be available throughout this evening. And always, if you think of something at 10 o'clock tonight, as we always do, feel free to drop us an email in the following days and we'll get back to you with the answer. Next slide, please, Marisa. You will have to bear with, we aren't actually at the office, we're not together, so there will be a bit of, next slide please, so just bear with. So as you've already heard me refer to her, I am joined by my lovely colleague Marisa Bretherton-Mackay, who is our Group Support and Business Operations Manager, and Marisa will be covering the health and safety and the safeguarding element of this evening. Next slide please. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of background as to why the green card was updated. So way back when, before COVID was even a thing, and I wasn't in my role at this point, the wording and how it was out of date. They developed some wording together and then the pandemic happened. Picking this up, when I got my role and came back after furlough, I consulted with national leads who then spoke with their reps regarding the updates and make sure they were still happy with it, as it had been a couple of years by this point. So some of the key changes I'll go through with you this evening. On the front cover, nothing really has changed, other than that you are no longer required to send the green cards into national office once they're completed. They need to be stored securely with your group. I'll go a bit more into detail about that later. So as always, you used to get a certificate from national office when you completed your green card. These are now done in-house. You can order the certificate on the screen from the group orders website, which is also where you order the relevant resources to the green card I'll speak about later, as well as the green cards themselves. Just on a note, I had a query today about the A4 basic training sheet. These are still very much relevant and used. It was just I had a query saying people hadn't heard if we were still using them or not. We still are. Next. Next slide, please, Marisa. So this is the first new page in the green card. So this is for all volunteers to complete. They need to be given the copy of the Getting Started booklet. So the Getting Started booklet is available on group orders, and if you go onto where you'd order your green card from, if you scroll down to the bottom, it's on related content. I can't remember the specific wording, but if you scroll down to the bottom, it's there. These are free of charge as always from the group orders website. This booklet is a guide of what to include in your induction for your new volunteer. It's not saying this is how you have to do it in this order. It's just a guide for what to include, and it also gives the new volunteers something to take away from their first session, as for something to refer to. As I don't know about everybody else, but when I had my induction, my head was full, so I'd have quite liked to have something to refer to at the end of it. So this booklet isn't just a booklet, there is some practical training which needs to be done in order to have this element signed off. So before, anybody could sign off a volunteer, whereas we've changed that so that all training can be done by an experienced, competent volunteer. However, final sign-off needs to be done by a coach. So as well as this quick getting started, your new volunteer will need to be given an introduction to safeguarding booklet, as well as health and safety for their venue, which includes like yard health and safety, working in a safe manner, appropriate clothing. So that's all to be done within the first session of that volunteer's experience. So the activity specific training has been updated. However, It's just the wording that's been updated. The actual, what we're asking them to learn how to do hasn't. It is still as the same content. The wording has just been updated. There's just been some slight confusion in that. We've just updated the wording. Next slide, please, Marissa. So the carriage driving element is probably the area which has changed the most for our new green card. Our carriage driving national lead, Eileen, along with the consultation of her carriage driving reps, made the decision to include a minimum age for the roles and tasks which are required. They made this decision due to the additional risk of having a carriage involved. And obviously there can be extra danger, so they felt it was appropriate to have some of the elements to have a 16+ requirement. So having said this, we didn't want our volunteers who already volunteer with us to be told, well, you could do this one week, now you can't. We wanted the volunteers who are already volunteering with us to be able to continue to volunteer as they already have done. So any volunteer who falls under the minimum age and has already been green carded before the update, they are still able to complete all the tasks they were doing previously. The new green cards have got the day, the month they were released in the bottom corner, so you know which is which, just in case you've had some new volunteers. Next slide, please. So an item which is completely new for our green card is the e-learning element. So as we have this amazing opportunity for you all to do the e-learning, and it is a great tool to expand your knowledge, a bit of development for yourselves and your volunteers. We're strongly encouraging all volunteers to log on to our e-learning site. The web address is there if you type that in. We haven't made this compulsory because we haven't wanted it to become a barrier to volunteers who might not have access to the internet or might not be able to complete our e-learning. That's why it's not compulsory. We just would really like you to do it and highly recommend. So the one we would really like you to do the most, if you're going to do any of the e-learning whatsoever, is the disability awareness. This is the module which we think would be beneficial to enable our participants to have the most fantastic experience. Not that they already don't have that, but just so we're aware of so many different things that training covers. Next slide, please. So data sharing, this is a biggie, so I'm just going to touch on it briefly. It's just because all green cards should be kept securely with your group, and they shouldn't be shared with anyone unless the reason is legitimate and you've had the individual's permission, so the green card holder's permission. Ideally, written permission is best, so if anything does come back from it, you've got written permission to say that they were happy for that information to be shared with that individual. Just because they've given written consent once doesn't mean it's for every time. It'd be for that one individual time. So our group data protection policy is available on my RDA website underneath the policies tab on the left hand side. I'm sure you're familiar with it. I've just had a couple of questions. We're just running a bit ahead of time. So the coach doesn't have to oversee, so the training can be delivered by anybody, so any competent volunteer, whereas the coach does final sign off. So the coach has to watch the person do it and then tick to say that they're happy that that's done. So the sidewalkers training and the side helping and leading is all included within the getting started document. It's just not listed specifically, it's just within that document itself. I hope that helps. Right, so having hopefully answered a couple of questions, I am going to hand over to my lovely colleague Marissa, who is going to give us an overview of safeguarding and health and safety. Over to you.
Thanks, Faye. I will be on camera shortly. We're just having technical issues, but the two areas, as Faye's already said, that I'm going to be covering tonight, both of which I think it's important to stress at this point, are very large areas. This is a short webinar, but so I'm just going to touch on the core points of each section on the green card that are relevant to both safeguarding and health and safety. And this was within the context of a volunteer briefing and a progressive volunteer training pathway as well. So if we start with the safeguarding leaflet, which is, you'll see on your green card, is a brand new element on there. The safeguarding leaflet, you can see a picture of it there on the slide. It's actually a A5 document, glossy, it's professionally printed, and you can order it free of charge in the normal way from the Group Orders micro site. If you've not actually visited that, just a sort of bit of a side note as well, it's a brilliant, brilliant place to go and order all of your free and some trading item resources as well. So if you go to the My RDA website and click on the Group Orders option to the left of the screen, it will take you through to a little micro site, and it's a virtual shopping experience, and you can fill your basket 24 hours a day, email the orders directly to my team, the group support team at National Office, which is definitely the most efficient way of getting all your resources right now. We'll aim to get you those quite quickly. So as I said, this is a hard resource, so definitely take full use of it, because we've invested in these and we're really proud of them as a piece of an additional tool, I should say, to your training resource. So with that in mind, we've also got, it was a bit of an unexpected edition, but we've got some larger font editions of this as well in an A4 leaflet size, which if you've got people perhaps with visual impairment or some form of low vision, they're an excellent resource. So make sure you specify that to the team if you want a larger font one, because we can currently provide that on a limited basis. With the leaflet, we actually send out an information sheet as well, so you won't be floundering. It does give us explicit instructions really on how you can use this leaflet. And the reason we've developed it is because we've had as you'd imagine, a wide portfolio of safeguarding resources for quite a long time now. But Laura and myself on the safeguarding team, with the extended network that we have, we've identified a need for resources that can be used as basic training for all volunteers, existing volunteers, but specifically for those who are younger. Because as Faye mentioned earlier, we've got e-learning courses, there's a quiz as well, plus a more advanced accredited course, but actually that's classed as age 16 plus, which is fantastic if you're a coach looking to get onto that pathway. But we need a way of informing and protecting our younger volunteers on their journey as well. So we've developed this with all age groups in mind. So essentially the first step of that would be to hand it out on arrival. So you'd work through each step of this leaflet. It's a brilliant tool, and I'll just move on to the next slide now to explain a little bit about the sections on each page. It's a short document, but hopefully we can cover some of the key areas. So you can see what we did was we potted a lot of the safeguarding guidance into what we call the 10 golden rules. So these are things that all people in all settings in RDA, both in the group session and actually thinking outside the session as well, should be thinking of. And actually from your point of view, if you're training your volunteers, this provides a brilliant platform to work through each of these 10 points, chat to volunteers about them to make sure that they understand how that might affect them. But it also is important to listen to find out if they've got any questions that they'd like to explore. We all know with safeguarding in RDA, those of us who've been around for a lot longer, what safeguarding actually means. But when someone comes into RDA, particularly if they've not had an experience perhaps in the school environment, or where they've come into contact with children or young people or adults at risk, they might simply not know what the term safeguarding means. So it's best not to have any assumptions at all and start at the basics and listen, ask questions and relay the information as well. So work through each of the points, give them the chance to ask questions, but also to discuss what's best practice in your setting, which I'll come on to with health and safety as well, because as I said, we're literally just talking about this on a very essential framework basis, but you might have key procedures and key practices in your group that you've implemented as part of your more extensive policies, and don't be afraid to cover those as well. A really important aspect of this as well, and it's not covered in the 10 points there, but you'll see on the last point on my slide, part of the briefing should always be to explain who the safeguarding officer is. Now, you should have safeguarding officers, at least one in every group. If you don't have someone who's appointed to do that, and it's an official role, they'll need to have undergone training and certification, so we can do that for you. So contact either myself or Laura Cartwright at National Office. We'll talk you through the process if someone is interested in accepting that role and wants to make sure that they're as informed as they can be. It also may well be that for each session, you'll have an extended safeguarding officer who's responsible for the overlook of the whole group, but you might well have people who are duty safeguarding officers on that session as well. So we've actually got some resources on the safeguarding page, so you can download a poster. You can put it up on the wall to say who the safeguarding officer is and their agreed contact details. Make sure they've given permission to give those out as well, and that you've briefed your volunteers as part of the safeguarding training that we're talking about today about who that safeguarding officer is, how they should be contacted as well, and the kind of things that they should be looking out for, which is essentially covering under the 10 golden rules of safeguarding there. But moving on to the next slide, you can see this is actually a double page spread here. So one is the middle page, one is the final page of the leaflet. So on the left-hand side, you can see how to deal with a safeguarding concern. Now, we're not experts, we're not professionals in safeguarding. It's important to realise that. And what we don't want is for people to be daunted, feeling that they've got to deal with a concern. So a concern here, we talk about what a concern is, but also what a disclosure might be. And it's up to you to have a chat or work with your safeguarding officer to inform your team how best to handle that. Now, it could well be, and it should be, that it's just they know who to approach. If somebody tells them something that they don't feel comfortable with, sorry, I'm talking too quickly, apparently, sorry, with someone who might be, sorry, it threw me a little bit there, I do apologise. But yes, they're talking through how to make a disclosure, but the simple answer is knowing who to tell and how to get that message through. So things to listen out for. We can all have a disclosure or a comment made to us at certain times, not sure how to handle it. So that's what you need to work through at this session as well. So the guidance is on that side of the leaflet there that explains what a disclosure is, how to be discreet, how to pass it on, and how quickly you need to act as well. So that's a very important aspect of that. And then the page that you can see on the right is the contact information. So the idea that behind that is that you can fill in at group level the elements that you need for contacting at your group. So you'd put your group safeguarding officer, your primary safeguarding officer's details in the section there as well. You've got a section there for adult social services. So if you've got an immediate concern or someone's made a disclosure to you that you feel needs acting on, there's a cover there specifically for adult social services. And then for children and young people, you can either phone the NSPCC, particularly if it's an inquiry or you just want a bit of advice at this stage, or you may well have your children's social services. It's really important as well, just a reminder at this stage, that if anyone does make a disclosure at your group and you've recorded it, that you contact National Office, which would be me in the first instance, Laura Cartwright in the second, even if it's happened out of hours, to let us know what's happened so that we can support you with advice and progress of that case. The other thing to remember is if you've got an immediate risk of anyone at harm, so if there's immediate threat of harm or risk to life, the obvious answer is that you phone the police as well, but always let us know what action you've taken. So that's a brief overview of the safeguarding leaflet. If you've got specific queries about that, myself and Laura and the safeguarding team, we're always in the National Office, please email us with any questions and we'll be happy to give you some customized advice for your setting as well. So talk your volunteers through that. But as I said, if you want a bit of a plan of how to brief your volunteers or some way of preparing that briefing, then get in touch with us and we can help you prepare that. So the next section that I'm going to be covering, and again, it's a huge section, so we're just touching briefly on it today, is the health and safety briefing aspect of the card. In the sections there, it's important to remember that any briefing will be extremely explicit to your setting. So although we're going to touch on the core areas that we would expect to see, there may well be, which I'll come to at the end of this slide, other areas that you would need to investigate, considering the nature of the work that that volunteer is going to be tasked with. Now, obviously, you'll have already covered on the earlier section of the card, the briefing to the yard, so the how to behave on the yard, what footwear to wear, appropriate dress. So moving on to the next stage, which is the true health and safety side of things as well, is make sure that you've prepared a briefing for your volunteers. Now, the best way of doing that is speak to people who are already doing the job, but also explore your venue risk assessment and your group session risk assessments to make sure that you've thought about all the things that might affect an emergency or a health and safety situation in your training session. So essentially, prepare that briefing as well. And then core areas that we would expect you to cover is think about who the first aider is. And also importantly, let the volunteers know who your group first aiders are. They'll need to make sure they've got their first aid training certificate. And actually, if you can just see there on the slide, we've got some pictures of little armbands. And actually, the group I volunteer with, we've bought some of these armbands for our group and they're brilliant, particularly for people who've got low vision or visual impairment, because we've actually got bright neon ones and it's quite easy to see in the session who those people are and they're immediately identifiable and they should always be in striking distance of your session. So that's point one of first aid. The second point is make sure that everybody knows where the first aid kit is. Clearly, if you're a first aider, you'd be supporting that delivery, but it's important that you might need to send someone to go and get that first aid kit. So make sure that they know where it is. And as a side note to you as a group trainer as well, make sure that that kit is always fully stocked as well. Check it periodically and top it up as needed as well. The next step is to talk about the accident book. Now, interestingly, I've had a couple of inquiries about this recently as well. I know historically on the RDA website, we've had a couple of disposable sheets that we've had that have been designed as a temporary form or a form that you could put into a ring binder to record your accidents. Moving on from that, we would much prefer, and for those of you who've already made inquiries about this, I will be following up with you privately, that you purchase a traditional accident book, not least because they're HSE, the Health and Safety Executive compliant, but also because they're actually more GDPR compliant now. They're more secure, you could lock them away, sheets aren't likely to get disposed of and lost, which is very, very important. And also, as a side note, in addition to this training as well, I regularly get questions about what to do, how to periodically to review the accident book. So best practice is, if trustees are listening tonight, just review your accident book at each of your trustee meetings to make sure that you're fully aware of what's happened and any follow-up actions that might be needed. We're not going to go into incident reporting clearly in this webinar, but if you've got questions about that, please just get in touch with me and I can talk you through the situation. So another area that you might need to think about is biosecurity, which you should have in your risk assessments. It's worth reminding you of that. But actually, we've all come out of the pandemic for the past 2 years, so we'll have got used to thinking about COVID protocols, for example, health and safety, sanitising, keeping kit clean, staying away if you've got symptoms. Now, there's some guidance being updated on the MyRDA website about specifically about how we've changed the COVID guidance for groups now. So that will hopefully be on the website by the end of tomorrow. But clearly we've got practices that should still stay in place, and indeed groups will want to keep some practices in place for themselves to keep their people safe. So it's worth briefing your volunteers at this point if you've got any biosecurity or health and safety practices that relate to your health and welfare of your staff, as well as aligning with everything else. And that may also be biosecurity for equines. So if there's situations with equine flu or strangles in the local area, you might have put temporary protocols in place of that, or advanced knowledge of what to do if those protocols are in place, so the volunteers understand what that might mean to them and their setting as well. Other really, really important thing is when you're doing your housekeeping briefings, and this is an idea to do it briefly every session, particularly if you've got new volunteers joining you or people who come to your sessions infrequently, is to talk through the fire process for your group. It's easily overlooked when we're thinking about the safety of people and horses, but absolutely explain where the fire exits are, what to do in the event of a fire or other emergency evacuation. So there could be another emergency locally that means that you have to move out from your setting as well. And also to let people know at the start of each session if you're expecting a fire drill. So if they hear an alarm, they'll know what to do in that situation. They'll know it's not a practice run and they should know what to do. So brief people where the assembly points are. Does everybody know this? And also let them know each session who's responsible for evacuating everybody on a premises should there be an emergency. And that also includes equines as well. So although you'll have a plan in place for that, make sure you communicate that to your volunteering team as well. Know what they need to do and to stay calm. And again, the final reminder is to practice all of this. Other things that you might want to consider, depending on, I started at the beginning of this slide, that you might want to consider for your setting might be if they're using chemicals or solutions or something that might be hazardous to health. So under the COSH regulations, which is the control of substances hazardous to health, you might want to include some training on that for specific things. It could be as simple as fly spray. It could be a topical ointment that you apply to your horses, but worth just bearing that in mind. The other key thing, which is really, really important on a yard, and it may well be relevant to the task that you do, particularly if you've got people moving tack, lifting saddles down, moving hay bales, lifting feed, is talk about manual lifting as well. So we've got advice that we can give you on that, but also the health and safety section of the government website is brilliant, that talks about appropriate lifting techniques as well. But as I said, we're really pushed for time today, but if you've got any questions about that, just message me at the office and I'll hopefully be able to answer them. Thanks, back over to you, Faye. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Marisa. I've just had a quick look at the questions and we've had a really good one come in, which I think we could answer. Is how do the safeguarding officers get training and certification? I know this is quite a common question, and as all groups need at least one, hopefully putting it in this, people can we can help some groups get some more safeguarding officers. Are you okay to answer that one, Marisa?
Of course, yeah. So I'll touch on it quite quickly. So essentially, they'll need to have done an accredited course. Now, in RDA, we run our own. We've produced it in conjunction with BEF and other member bodies as well. The reason we like ours is because the case studies, the scenarios that we do are specific to an RDA environment. So actually, they're quite relevant to what we do. However, other accredited courses are appropriate. British Horse Society also run a great one, as do Pony Club. We expect people to do them every 3 years. So a safeguarding officer would need to do one of these. And the best place to start would be to email Laura Cartwright at National Office, who can chat to you about the options available to you. During lockdown, obviously we've already had physical in-person meetings, which can still happen now, but we also had our own training course accredited for delivery via Zoom, which hopefully will make it more accessible for many people. I know we're all pushed for time. There are still people who are cautious about travelling as well, so we have options for both. So if you've got someone who wants to put themselves forward for safeguarding training, they need to get a course and they don't currently have an accredited one under their belt, get them to drop us a line. So lcartwright@rda.org.uk. She's brilliant and she'll be able to tell you the steps that you need to take. And subsequent to that, there's also an acceptance form that they need to complete at the group level and keep on file as well. So, but we'd happily chat to you about that offline.
Fab. Thank you for that, Marisa. I hope that's answered the question, and hopefully lots of groups can get more safeguarding officers. And thank you for going through the health and safety and the safeguarding. That's absolutely fantastic. I'm sure we've answered lots of questions.
The whistle stop
here
tour.
are our contact. Yeah. Here are our contact details. I'll leave them up on the screen for a couple of seconds just so you can make a note of those. And thank you for coming to our webinar. As always with these weekly webinars, they are available on the My RDA YouTube channel. You can find that if you head to My RDA, scroll down to the bottom, and there's a link there on the main RDA page. If you did want to just think, oh, I can't remember what they said about that, you can go and have another look. And just on the subject of other webinars, please don't forget to come next week for a strategy Q&A with Paul Ringer, our interim CEO, and Rachel Medill, the RDA UK chair. Other than that, that's all from us. Have a lovely Thursday evening, and we'll speak to you all soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye-bye.